everyone, Rachel Berg, Realtor with Bridgewell Real Estate Group. The market is definitely heating up in the Lower Mainland, and so it's January 2020. The last quarter of 2019 was definitely the busiest, and December specifically had a huge increase in sales. January of 2020 has just continued to move forward really strong. We have a little bit more of a compressed inventory like we usually do in the winter time. But we have a really big surge of demand. And so a lot of people were starting to talk about the bottom of the market in the end of 2019. And I think that dialogue has really just continued through for January. And that's why we've seen such a big surge in demand. And so I'm seeing a lot of multiple offer scenarios all of this week. I've had 4 different properties and all of them went multiple. So, this is different types of properties too. I had 2 townhouses, 1 condo, and 1 detached home. So it's not just like, one part of the market is heating up and, the other is staying stagnant. I'm really seeing it across the board for a lot of different types of properties in a lot of different areas. Those 4 properties were 2 in Surrey, 1 in Coquitlam, and another one in Vancouver. So it's really interesting, and I'm interested to see what happens for the rest of the spring market. But anytime we're dealing with a transitional market, the conversation of listing price versus selling price, also known as asking price versus market value, comes into play. And it's not an easy thing for a seller or a buyer, right? Like in a cooling market, a lot of the times the question comes, why do I have to sell for less than listing price? And in a rising market, the question then in turn for a buyer becomes, why do I have to pay more than the listing price? But we really do have to just get an understanding that those 2 things are determined by 2 totally different parties. And so who determines the listing price? It's the seller. The seller is the one that sits down with their realtor, agrees to sign the listing contract, and they determine a listing price based on their strategy together. And there's a lot of different ways that you can price a home, but when the listing price is determined, the buyer is completely out of this. The listing price is solely determined by the seller. Whereas when we're talking about selling price, that's essentially market value. And how is market value determined? It's basically what a buyer and a seller are willing to come to an agreement to in terms of price. But who has more weight to determine what the selling price is going to be? It's likely the buyer, because the buyer is the one that writes that initial offer, that contract of purchase and sale, and it basically initiates this whole selling process. So that's why those things are different, is because listing price is mainly determined by the seller, and then the selling price, or market value, is more weighted to being determined by the buyer. So when we're trying to figure out the difference between these 2 things, just because you pay more than the listing price doesn't necessarily mean you've overpaid. And just because you pay less than the listing price doesn't necessarily mean you got a good deal. And so, that can seem like kind of a shock. But when you think about the different ways that there are to list a property, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. And so essentially what, I hope you guys can see this, what options a seller has when they're deciding to list is they can list at market value, right? They can list below, or they can list above market value. So the reason why this is important to know is because, you want to know that you're not overpaying for a property, and you want to know that you're not underselling a property. And so really market value is the goal. And so market value, an easy way to determine market value, again, we're going back to just like the definition of what a seller and a buyer are willing to accept. But how does that, how do you predict that? And essentially the best way to do that is to look at recent sales for comparable properties to see what other sellers and buyers were able to accept, and then factor in the pros and cons of how the subject property compares to the comparable property, and then also any market conditions. Like for example, if one property just sold for $500,000 but the market is rising, then maybe a similar property will sell for $510,000, and that becomes the new market value in a heating market. But going back to different ways to list a property and understanding the difference between listing price and asking price, listing price and market value, you have different ways. So you can list at market value, you can list above market value, or you can list below market value. They're just strategies, right? If you list above market value, most people are going to see that that property is overpriced compared to other things on the market, other sales that have recently sold, and they're going to have less demand at this particular price because they are overpriced, or they're over market value. And so what happens in this situation is a lot of the times the sellers have to end up decreasing the price, and that's when you see price adjustments. 90% of the time, if somebody isn't selling, it's going to be because the value of the property just isn't there compared to the listing price. And so you'll see either adjustments, or you might see somebody try and lowball, and in that situation, you will probably end up somewhere around here. And sometimes this strategy ends up backfiring even more because people start to wonder what's wrong with it. It becomes a stigmatized property and it'll sell for less than market value, and it's not always the most effective strategy. So that's listing above market value. If you list at market value, demand will probably still be there depending on what type of market you're in. And so this is a pretty safe bet. If you're in a cooling market, it can be a little bit difficult because buyers don't always understand the difference between listing price and market value. And so over the past year, a lot of people have kind of been listing in this sweet spot here where they're trying to essentially, make sure that the interest is still there and that buyers don't feel that they're significantly overpriced, but still leaving a little bit of wiggle room so that buyers can feel like they're getting a deal, even though really all they're paying is market value. But it depends on how quickly you want to sell, right? And so another strategy that a lot of sellers will take is listing below market value, and that can be for a number of reasons. Either they want to sell quickly, or it could be that they're trying to gain a lot of demand because a lot of buyers will see, alternative to listing above market value, if you list below market value, a lot of buyers are going to see, oh my God, that looks like such a good deal. It's so much less expensive than the other properties that are on the market, or I just saw one last week that sold $50,000 more. I really want to see that one. You gain a lot of momentum, a lot of demand, a lot of people interested, exposure, etc., etc. And then that's when you start to see multiple offer scenarios. A lot of people are interested in that property. A lot of people want to buy it. A lot of people put offers on it. And once multiple offers happen, that's when you get a lot of the bidding. So take 2016 for example. People were writing on properties, were dealing with 8-10 offers on a property. People outbid each other, and then it sells for way more than the list price. But a lot of the times it's still sold for right around where the other sales that were priced at, say, market value sold for. So really what I'm trying to get at is that listing price and market value are two different things. A property, most of the time, regardless of what the listing strategy is, will always come back to market value, because most buyers, when they're determining what to offer, are looking at sales to help them predict what true market value is, aside from the listing price. And then they're factoring in what the market conditions are. Is it a cooling market? Is it a heating market? And how do you adjust for the last sale based on that to determine today's market value? So, again, this can be a little bit difficult to get the first time around, why someone would have to pay more than list price, why someone would have to accept less than list price. But really it just comes down to listing price is solely determined by the seller. It's simply a strategy, and it does not necessarily represent what true market value is. So I hope this makes sense to you guys. If you are a seller that's looking to get an estimate on your home's market value, and you're also looking for a listing strategy based on your particular real estate goals, definitely feel free to reach out to me anytime. We provide free home market evaluations, no pressure, no obligation, just so that you know what your home could sell for, and we can recommend you a listing price accordingly. And then also, if you're on the buying side of things and you're wanting a realtor to help you understand what selling price should be, market value, we do always do comparative market analysis for any properties that we're going to be writing offers on or that our buyers are seriously interested in. And that's one of the services that we provide as a buyer's agent. So we always want to make sure that you're just getting exactly what you should be paying for that property and not overpaying as a buyer, and really just breaking this down in a lot more detail so that you understand and you know what to expect when it comes to dealing with any offer, but particularly multiple offer scenarios now that we're moving back into that kind of market. So anyone, feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have real estate questions or you're thinking about selling or buying. My name again is Marie Gobert, Realtor with Bridgewell Real Estate Group. We service all of the Lower Mainland, and I'm based in Coquitlam, specifically myself, so the beautiful Tri-Cities. I hope this video was helpful for you guys, and I will be posting more stuff this upcoming week. Enjoy the change in the market. I welcome it. It's going to be fun. It's definitely an interesting market. It's transitioning, so it can be a little bit difficult in terms of understanding for buyers and sellers, but that's what I'm here for, and I'll definitely be providing you guys more content for matters just like this. So feel free to like, subscribe, or comment in this video, and I will definitely see you guys around. Have a good one, guys.